and made us his own. Now we're part of the family.
The disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the feet. And they asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "And they've taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. "Woman," he said, "why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where they put him, and I will get him." There Jesus said, "Mary." And he turned around and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means "my teacher." And Jesus said to her, "Don't hold on to me, for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them I'm returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God."
Well, happy Sunday, church. I'm so excited to be with you this morning. Grateful for my guest, Jeff Smith. I'm thankful that he's taken the time. We're here in his backyard, enjoying a cool morning with a little bit of sprinkle. But Jeff, man, when I think about Jeff, he is a husband, he's a father, he's a grandfather. He has started a ministry called Disciple Trips, and we'll put that right down here in the comments and let you go check that out. And I'll let Jeff plug that here in a minute. But Jeff has been a minister for decades there with Sunset, a youth minister, a college minister. Jeff has had a lot of experience with the church, and I think it's appropriate on this lesson 12, Go to the Brethren, that Jeff is here to speak to us. He has such a heart for making peace, for uniting people, just a creative heart, just a great spirit to be able to say, hey, what's another way we can make this happen? Jeff and I got to go to Mexico a couple of Decembers ago, and it was so much fun for me. He's been a friend and been a mentor, and so I'm just really thankful and honored to have Jeff. I'll let you plug Disciple Trips or whatever you'd like to. If you want to say anything to the church about that before we get into our lesson.
Well, just real quick, my parents were missionaries in Africa. I lived there when I was a teenager, and it just changed my life. Probably kept me out of a lot of trouble, but really. And then I became a youth minister years later, and in our brotherhood, there was no one really leading trips for our students, especially for smaller churches that didn't have contact connections. And so there were some parachurch organizations, but what they teach, and just we weren't comfortable with. And so I thought someone who could do that for us. And so way back then, I was searching for that as a young youth minister, and never found it. But I found some other churches that were going on mission trips and just invited ourselves with them. But at that time, I had the first dream and vision of Disciple Trips. That was like 25 years ago.
Wow.
So I took my group to Mexico, tagged along with some Texas churches. I was in Oklahoma at the time.
Okay.
But God put that dream on my heart, and about 9 years ago, it became a reality. So this is our ninth year. This is kind of a weird year.
It's a weird year.
Asterisk year.
Yeah.
We were on pace to have our record season, but anyways, Lord is rebooting the system, I guess. And so we look forward to going next year, Lord willing, and we'd love to have some of you guys join us on a short-term mission trip stateside or in this part of the hemisphere, kind of Mexico, Central America, just a lot of cool places. And it's safe. We don't go anywhere that's just going to be dangerous, but we want to give everyone that chance to see the world through the eyes of Jesus, be part of that great commission, that go that we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's good. So be looking for more information on that this spring and summer. Jeff and I are talking about different trips, different possibilities. And so Green Lawn, we definitely want to encourage you, whether you're young or old. I think the minimum with parent is 14. Is that correct?
Yeah, 14 and up with the parent. If the parent can't go, it could be 16.
Okay.
With the parent's blessing. But we've had someone as old as 83 go with us. So we're intergenerational. We'd love for all of you to come.
Yeah,
you're never too old for a mission trip.
That's right. And they're great opportunities to just learn and grow. So much fun, but so much growth, so much service, loving people, being pushed, being challenged. But again, that idea is always being a disciple, following Christ, whether you're local or going somewhere else. And so definitely want to encourage you to be looking into that in the near future.
And that's in our name, Disciple Trips. That's what we're
is.
trying to be about, taking disciples to make disciples. And our byline is faith taking flight, and that's all about this idea of growth, like you mentioned. Just our faith gets to higher flight, to higher altitude, I guess.
Yeah.
As we are challenged in these ways and stretched.
Yeah. So good. Well, this morning we're going to be talking about this idea of going to the brethren, and we're going to talk a little bit about church hurt. When you think about church hurt, whether you've been one to hurt or maybe one to be hurt, that you've been offended. Jeff and I, obviously in ministry, have experienced this at one point or another. I've asked Jeff just to kind of take a moment to share whatever story or whatever he'd like to share about that idea. But this idea of Jesus telling Mary, go back and tell that I'm resurrected. Go back and tell that there's hope. Go to my followers. And so I think when we think about missions, we often think about somewhere else or somebody new. But I think there's also this idea throughout the Bible of a restoration, even bringing back the ones that have maybe been hurt. So I want to open that, pass that to you, Jeff. This idea of church hurt, stories that you want to share, or anything you want to say on that subject.
Yeah, it's so important for us to minister inside the body. Sometimes we think, okay, outreach is out the body, but sometimes we need to reach in, and because I know as a youth minister, a lot of our kids leave the church. They grew up in the church, we've invested in them, and then like 80% of them leave the church within their first year of going off to college. And that's crazy. I don't like that statistic at all.
That's horrible.
So why are we losing our kids, or even other families later on? People just give up on their faith. And so what's happening? What's causing that doubt? But I think sometimes it's the hurt you're talking about. Someone, you're in a church family, it's supposed to be all great people, and yet sometimes you get attacked inside the body, and that's very personal and it's very painful.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously our objective is never to bash the church. We're not trying to say anything negative towards the church. We are the church. I mean, we're part of the church, and so our objective in this lesson is not to say woe to the church. No. Our objective in this lesson is to try to remind us we need to be careful. We need to be blessing our brothers. We need to walk with one another, encourage one another, build each other up. We want to bless each other. So as we look at some of these scriptures and consider these things, we want to remember that it's not just an attack from Satan outside. Sometimes it's things we do or say without considering our brother, what they need, how we can serve them, or we just want something to happen so bad that we kind of roughshod over somebody to make it happen, and then that causes other conflict. So want to look here at Romans chapter 15, verse 1. Paul's writing to the church. This version's a little bit different. It's an easy to read version here. But in Romans 15 verse 1, Paul writes, "We are strong with faith, so we should help the people who are weak. We should help them with their weaknesses. We should not try to please ourselves." I don't know if your version says something really distinct there or if it's along the same lines.
Well, not to please ourselves, but to please our neighbor and to build them up.
Yeah. So what does that mean for me in as a disciple? How do I need to be considerate of that verse?
Well, again, I think, we're not bashing the church, but another way to look at the church is it's a family. We are a family. We love our families, but sometimes families, there's trouble, there's some drama, there's some, frustrations, there's Cousin Eddie, there's people like that, that you're just like, whoa. But you don't stop loving those people, right? But sometimes if we're not careful, maybe we shun those people, or we felt like we've been that person, and we've kind of been neglected, ignored, or even attacked. Yeah. And so that can happen inside a church family too.
That's right.
And that's what we have to guard against. And that's why it's so important then to those of us who are strong, as it says here in the text, ought to bear the burden of the weak. Yeah. And so we need to be out there looking as men and women of God for those that are hurting in our midst, and try to do what we can to minister to them, to carry their burden, and please them and not ourselves.
That's good. It's funny because a lot of times we kind of think of ourselves as strong, but we act like we're weak. We kind of do the opposite of what we should be doing, because the strong will be humble. The strong will not be as sensitive. the strong will be considerate of others. Therefore, we need to live that way. We don't need to think of ourselves as the mature one, but then act like the immature one. And so, yeah, you talked about the word guard ourselves, or that idea of guarding ourselves. I think that's really important. And again, this idea of it's not all about me. And that's also pointed out here in Galatians chapter 6. I want to flip over there to Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. Paul again will talking to the church there at Galatia. This church has had a lot of challenges dealing with going back to circumcision, going back to the law, returning to something kind of a Christ plus. And Paul's encouraging the church in this idea. Galatians chapter 1, verse 6. Do you have that one?
I do.
Do you mind reading 1 and 2, please?
Yeah, it says, brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourselves, or you may also be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ.
Very good. So there's a lot
Yeah.
in those two verses there. You kind of emphasize that word gentle.
Yes.
Talk about that for a little bit. Let's talk about the importance of that, not only in this context, but just period, Christian or non-Christian, maybe especially with a brother or sister.
Well, again, I think it's part of the humility. We don't want to come across as we're the person that knows everything, or I think you can even be a spiritual bully if you're not careful.
Good, yeah, that's
You're so strong and so spiritual, and you really have the best interest of this person at heart, but you come across like a bull in a china closet, and you don't mean to be a bully. I know I've had a lot of parents that would call me as a college minister, and their kids off to college for the first time, and they're worried about them, and they weren't, they're struggling, and will they go to church? And they call me, a total stranger, and say, hey, my kid's coming to Texas Tech. Will you go check on them and make sure they go to church? And I'm like, I'll help you, but why? Why the big group in your family and they're not going to church? Some total stranger's going to help them,
right?
So I don't know what occurred there, but I know some of that stuff again is just normal. And some students are just in a search process, and eventually we know that I said 80% leave. The good news is about 50% of them can come back.
Yeah.
And when they come back stronger. Their faith becomes theirs.
Good.
But somewhere along the way, they get hurt, or Satan lures them away. But I think, again, we need to do this gently and not go, well, you should know better, and we raised you right, or that kind of stuff. I mean, all of us are going to, Luke 15, all of us are going to wander like that sheep that left the fold.
That's right.
Or that son who left, his father's house. And I think it's really important. All of us take what I call our prodigal journey at some point in life. And we just wander off and get off in the far country. But we need someone who loves us, who will pursue us, and gently bring us home.
Yeah.
Like that shepherd, he put that sheep on his shoulders and brought him back to the flock.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Galatians is talking about. Do so, but do it gently.
Do it gently. He also mentions the word you who are spiritual. Talk about that for a minute. Why does he say you who are spiritual? Why does it matter? I'm a new convert. I'm excited about my faith. I'm excited about what God's doing in my life. I want to go restore this person. Why does he say those who are spiritual? What does he mean by that?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. I think he's trying to say, look, before you can bring someone back, you need to kind of check yourself.
Okay.
Maybe make sure that you get I guess Jesus put it this way in the Sermon on the Mount: get the plank out of your eye before you go get the speck out of somebody else's.
There you go.
So I think we need to kind of check ourselves at the door and make sure that we're we're clean with the Lord right now, and then otherwise those people perceive us as a hypocrite. Like, how can you come back after me?
Good point.
And I know what you did last night,
That's
or I
good,
saw on
yeah.
Facebook, or
Right.
whatever it is.
Sure.
We need to make sure again, not that we're perfect, because none of us could do anything, but that they know that we're on the right path. We may stumble from time to time, but I think we try to be spiritual, and we want to get them back on that path too.
Good. Kind of a primary focus there. Good. He also mentions to be careful.
Yes.
Be careful that you're not tempted to. Talk about that for a little bit.
I think that can happen. It's like, you go with good intentions, but if you're not careful, you may go into an environment that is a place where you struggled before, and you're trying to pull someone out of there, and they actually pull you back in. And so then Satan's won instead of the Lord.
Yeah. Good.
So we need to make sure that we don't do this. We need to just be cautious and careful and recognize there's a potential for harm even to our own faith.
Good.
And so maybe we don't go in by ourselves.
Good.
Maybe we go in with
Fight somebody
backup,
else.
you know?
That's good.
And so we have some accountability as we go in. And again, not to gang up on that brother or sister, but to let them see there's a community of people that love them and want them to come back to the family.
Yeah. So I'm hearing humility. I'm hearing a focus in this spirituality, kind of my desires to do right and seeking right. Also a guarding or protecting even of ourselves in this. In verse 2, he says we're to help each other with our trouble. How does yours
Well,
carry one another's
it
burdens?
says carry each other's burdens.
Carry each other's burdens, yeah.
So what I think is cool about that is I mean, all of us have some struggles, some burdens, and sometimes you get tired of just carrying that same thing. Isn't it nice when someone else says, "Hey, let me help you with that," and you get a break, you're feeling better, and then what's cool is that you can reciprocate.
Yeah.
And this is someone can carry my burdens.
That's right.
Because I guarantee you, somewhere along the way, I'm going to struggle too, and I'm not going to be doing so good. In fact, right now with this whole COVID thing, and I can't do our mission trips, I'm kind of bummed myself.
Sure.
And it would be nice to know that someone's looking after me and just checking up on me and going, "How are you doing?" and help carry that burden.
Yeah.
And I think if we were a body like that that's sensitive to each other, and I'm taking turns carrying your burden for a while, you carry my burden for a while, and we just have our radar out and we're looking for each other's burdens, you know, and like, I'll help you. You know, what does that mean? That means a lot to somebody when you recognize something they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And you then not just say, "Well, I'll pray for you," but you actually go and help carry it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Not only a word, but even an action in that time of need. Yeah. Let's look over here at James 5. James chapter 5, verse 19. There is a passage here towards the end, if I can get over here. It says, "My brothers and sisters, one of you may wander away from the truth, and another person may help him come back to the truth. Remember this," and I love this verse. "Any person who brings a sinner back from the wrong way will save that sinner's soul from death or from hell. By doing this, that person will cause many sins to be forgiven." Do you mind reading yours in verse 20 there, please?
Yeah, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of his way will save him from death and cover over a multitude of sins.
So when we think about church hurt, when we think about somebody that maybe has known and now has fallen away, and there seems to be, and I don't want to get into a huge doctrinal discussion here, but there seems to be this idea of it's even worse for somebody that has known God and then pulled away, whatever all the implications are of that. And so again, when you think about your brother or sister that was in Christ, that has been obedient to Christ, but then they've fallen away, and then James 5 comes along and says, go and restore this person. This is something that is crucial for them. How does that play together with just, again, kind of our typical mission idea of missions is out there with somebody new?
Yeah, I'll give you a really good example. You know, we take people on these short-term mission trips for about a week. Mostly there are people who are already disciples, Christians. We're taking disciples to make disciples. We want those disciples to grow too, but hopefully we're doing some outreach to evangelism.
Sure.
But sometimes we forget that really we may be ministering to the group ourselves, and our faith is taking flight. So at the start of each trip, we always talk about, what is your goal? Why are you on this trip? You know, what's your motivation? And this one young man just was probably a junior in New Mexico, a junior in high school, said, "I'll be honest with you guys, this is my last chance at the faith. Because I'm about to give up on the church.
Wow.
I think I'm done.
Wow.
But before I'm finished, I thought I'm going to give this mission trip one last chance to see." Well, we all felt the pressure.
No
We're
pressure,
like, "Oh my goodness,"
yeah.
you know? And
Yeah,
I'm just so glad he was open with us and honest, because a
true.
lot of times
Yeah.
people hide those things.
Right.
You know, they just walk
Find
away
out
and we
till
don't even
later.
know.
Yeah.
So at least he was really honest with us, and man, I mean, all of us just that put us on notice.
Rally, yeah.
And we rallied around him. We
Yeah.
loved him. We didn't treat him special. We didn't make him feel awkward. We just, recognized, wow, there's a mission inside the mission.
That's right. That's
There's
good.
someone here that we assume, was going because they want to share their faith. Well, their faith was crumbling. His faith was. And so at the end of the trip, as we're debriefing and going, what did God say to you on this trip? What did you get from the Lord that you could take back home? And he just said, "Man, I'm in. I'm all in. I'm back.
That's
My
awesome.
faith has been restored. This mission trip helped me see God in a new way and what my purpose is. And so, man, so to me, that trip was all about really maybe him, not even the people we met, but God used that to help someone who was actually going on mission, but he was really actually, treading water, about to drown spiritually.
Wow. Yeah. And how many stories are like that? Jeff mentioned the fact that he actually spoke up, but how many of those stories kind of are silent? And we don't know until much later. We're like, I haven't seen old Beverly for 6 months. Where's she at? What happened to Jim? What happened to Billy? And then all of a sudden, it can be almost a point of no return. But Jesus is calling us to be aware of one another, to love each other, to in humility. Again, a love for their soul, even beyond that awkwardness or the fear of, well, I might offend them further. I might push them further away. But this idea of, I love you so much that I will overcome whatever might stand between us. And kind of on that, let me transition to Luke 15. You mentioned that earlier. There's 3 stories there. There's kind of the story of the sheep. There's the story of the corn. And then there's the story of the sons. Maybe even the story of the father as well in that. But as we think about that story, in reality, he talks about the 100, and we always think of that story as the lost one, the one that's never known Jesus. But it seems like, again, you can interpret that different ways. The 100 were already there. He talks about the 100 and then the losing the one. There were 99, there was one. So maybe that was one that had left. Maybe that was one that never knew. But let's take it from the perspective of the one who had left. What is the shepherd willing to do in that scenario? It seems ludicrous as you study that. And I know you know that story. You love that story. You've shared that story in your own life and through different avenues that you've lived out that story and shared that story. What does that mean for us in this particular context of that brother, that one being a brother?
Well, Jesus tells us really the same point 3 different ways,
right?
Through these different angles, the camera lens, the sheep, the coin, the son. And the prodigal son is one we know the most, and that one's very personal with me. My son became prodigal for like 8 years. I mean, that youth minister's kid that goes off into addiction. And I can really relate to God in that story as the father waiting for the child to come home, wondering if they're going to, are they even dead, And so praise God, we didn't give up on him. But that first story, I love this because sometimes we just go with the odds. Like, well, there's 100 sheep. You just, one out of 100, you still got 99, right? And so we're like, it's like we can't ignore the 99. We got to take care and minister to them, right?
That's right.
So there's going to be some losses, but they're acceptable. Not to that shepherd. He was like, he left the 99 behind, and he went and sought out that one.
Wow.
And to me, that is so important. I mean, I think it's a really easy ministry to lose that, to go, well, there's a big crowd here, and we're not really noticing individuals.
Yeah.
And by names.
Right.
And so where is Sister Beverly? I think you mentioned a name.
Whatever.
Yeah. I know that was just a name, but.
It's sure.
So I think, it's funny. Recently I went took my grandkids to a water park, and it was really interesting to notice the lifeguards, what they were doing. They're out there, they're doing this, they're going, I mean, they're physically actually moving, watching, just scanning the wave pool or the lazy river, and you can literally see them doing this. And I was like, but they're very intentional about looking for somebody in harm's way. And I think that's what the church ought to be.
Oh, that's good.
Sunday mornings, I don't know that we all need to be bobbing our heads like this, that we might look Pentecostal, I don't know. But I do think, spiritually, our eyes ought to be roaming over the flock and going, who's missing?
Yeah, that's good.
And it's not the preacher's job.
Right.
It's all of us.
Right.
I think that story's for all of us to care about even one lost sheep. And make a phone call, write a card, go visit them. Do something to let them know they're not forgotten. I think a lot of people, like you said, I said that boy was like treading water about to drown. I think a lot of people are drowning and they're just slowly sinking, and we don't even see them. They're under the water, and later on, they're a casualty.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. I like especially the fact that, again, as disciples, we all should take ownership in that.
Yes.
That should not be something that we relegate or delegate to the paid staff or shepherds. that should be something that all of us are conscious of. There's a circle that sits around us on our pew that at the very least, if it's our small group, our Bible class, or those who are around us, we can make sure that they're okay and check in on them. And again, as Jeff mentioned, I think that'll be reciprocated because we all need that. The truth is we all need that to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I think that kind of transitions to kind of the last question. Just as a disciple, how do I keep my focus? How do I avoid from becoming a casualty? How do I avoid from becoming that one? What do I need to do in all this? Because again, that's a good thing. For too often we say, "Oh, Brother Joe needs to hear that," but what does that mean for me as a disciple?
Well, it's
Kind of, I guess, summary. I should say kind
yeah.
of a summary, and then.
Well, what I'm hearing in that is that if I'm, I said earlier in Galatians, if we carry each other's burdens.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I carry my own burden. I get fixated on my problems. I get discouraged, depressed, angry, whatever it is, and then Satan just spins off of that, and just takes me down. But if I would stop focusing on my burdens,
Yeah.
and look at yours,
There you
and see
go.
how can I minister to your problems? My problems may not look as bad.
That's right. That's right.
Or at least I'm not focused on them and fixated on my problems.
Right.
And I think, and then maybe someone else will be, as a family, coming and looking after my problems too. We'll just, again, as a community, just be aware and help each other, and so that this is a communal effort. We're doing this kind of woven together and not singularly having to be responsible for our own faith. I mean, each of us is responsible in a sense of that first wave of our faith, but I think really faith is not in a vacuum. It's in a community. It's in a church. It's in a family.
That's right.
And we need to be, and that's why I think it's so cool, the scripture we started with, when Jesus, Mary's just crying and she's missing Jesus. She's so sad about the whole thing that he's dead, and she's just going to honor him at the grave. And then when she realizes it's him, before he's, and later on he's going to say, go all to the world, but he says first, go to my brothers, go talk to them. They're hurting right now. They're maybe they're men, they're hiding their emotions. Mary's crying outwardly, but these men are all afraid and that kind of stuff, the disciples, the apostles. And Jesus says, before you go to the world, go back to my brothers. And I love that. I didn't really ever pay attention to that as much. And I think there's a deep strategy in that we need to make sure the church is healthy first, and that all of us are strengthened before we can then go out into the world.
Yeah, very good. I like that. I want to just finish by letting you have the last word. I don't know if there's something that we left out, something that you feel like needs to be said, or in the discussion that came up, anything that you feel like we need to finish with.
I just think that it's just so important that, again, that we have that radar out, that we really are looking, kind of like those lifeguards, or again, it's easy for us to kind of just be self-absorbed in our own problems. And I think if we would take our eyes off of ourselves, fix them on Jesus and on Jesus' people, all of a sudden everything comes into perspective. And I know if God's using me to help carry your burden, that makes me feel good too. I've helped you, but that makes me feel like God used me to help you, and that does strengthen my faith.
Yeah.
And I just think we got to do what we can to turn around these numbers. We shouldn't lose so many of our kids to the world.
Yeah.
And I think if we did a better job as a church family watching out for each other, we wouldn't. Not so many of them would leave home and leave the faith.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to see people's faith take flight. I want to see people growing, so that their faith is their own. That when they leave home, they have a faith that is their own and is strong. And so I just, but for that strength to occur, we've got to be doing this in community, and we got to be looking out for each other and each other's families, each other's kids, and just practice these one another verses.
Yeah, very good. I think COVID presents a unique challenge in all this, because some people might be staying home because of their health, and other people might actually be kind of falling away right now. And so we really need to be perhaps hyper vigilant during this time to make sure, again, whatever Bible class you were involved with, connecting with them, whatever small group kind of pre-COVID you were involved with, to be sure you continue to check in with them.
That's a really good point, because I do think it's easy for people to really slip through the cracks right now. They're watching church online,
right?
Or they may not be watching anything right now. They may just be huddled in their room, just just wrapped up in fear and
Yeah.
feeling so alone.
Yeah.
And so I think we can't take anything for granted. We just need to be, even if they're doing good, call them, man. Who doesn't mind to call
Right.
when you're doing good, you know?
Right.
But just like I said, let's be more intentional especially during this time.
Yeah.
And noticing the family of
Yeah.
God and as sheep, we're looking out for each other.
That's right. Again, this is, kind of the words I'm hearing here as we sum up, just kind of a humility about this, a gentleness about this, a spirit always motivated by love, by God's glory. I think these are crucial things that we need to keep in mind as we take care of one another. So I want to thank my guest, Jeff Smith. It's been great being with Jeff. Thankful for the backyard. We got a little sun, got a little rain, got a little bit of everything during our time back here. But we pray that this blesses you this week, that you're challenged, that you're inspired to call, to write, to visit, however you're able to do that. Check in on a brother, on a sister, and continue to love one another as a body. He's left us here, as Jeff mentioned, in community. And we can't do this by ourselves. We've got to do this together. And so I want to challenge you as you seek out God's glory this week, that you do that with somebody else, that you walk with other men, other women in your life, and that the church truly is united in that desire to seek God's glory. Be blessed.
And sometimes we laugh together, sometimes we cry, sometimes we share together heartaches and sighs.